Hello, my name is Henry. Thanks for coming today. Our group realized a little late that we had all finished our policy papers on Vietnam, but we didn't have anyone who had worked on a country profile. So instead of trying to find another body to put together a presentation, I have decided to tackle it. First, let's take a look at where Vietnam is on the globe. As you can see on this map, it is situated in Southeast Asia, where it is bordered by Laos, Cambodia and China. It is also a coastal nation, stretching 1,650 kilometers from the Gulf of Tonkin to the South China Sea. For comparison, Vietnam is roughly the same size as the state of New Mexico. Its terrain is largely low and flat in the southern part of the country and mountainous in the north, and the tropical climate makes the country quite lush. While Vietnam has a long history, its recent history is quite notable. Most people in the U.S. are familiar with the Vietnam War, but the history of Vietnam goes back at least 2,700 years ago. Anthropologists believe the Vietnamese people are descended from Mongol nomads, and there are legends of an ancient Vietnamese kingdom which thrived around 2300 BC. Vietnam also saw a series of Chinese satellite dynasties up until the mid-19th century. In 1858, the French invaded the area and established it as a full French colony in 1884. 3 years later, Vietnam was merged into the larger colony of French Indochina. French rule of the area began to deteriorate at the end of World War II, when Vietnam declared its independence, but managed to control of the area until 1954. That's when the Geneva Accords split the country into Communist North Vietnam and US-backed South Vietnam. Communist forces, led by Ho Chi Minh, fought with U.S. forces throughout the 1960s until 1973, when the United States pulled out of the country. That led to the unification of North and South under a communist government. But that didn't end the fighting. In 1977, Vietnam was in a war with Cambodia, and by 1979 was fighting off a potential invasion by the Chinese. Decades of war left its toll on the country. By the time the war with the United States had ended, more than 1.3 million Vietnamese were killed and tens of thousands more died fighting against the Cambodians and Chinese. Role in the destroyed infrastructure in Vietnam had years of economic trouble ahead of it. In the 1970s, the government tried to improve Vietnam's economy through collectivist and centralized policies. But things didn't begin to turn around until the late 1980s. That's when the government made baby steps towards privatizing some businesses. A few years later, relations with the United States began to normalize and Vietnam's economy began to take off. During the last 2 decades, Vietnam has made enormous economic strides and in 2007 became a member of the World Trade Organization. And while agriculture makes up about 25% of Vietnam's GDP, most Vietnamese, more than 51%, works in agriculture. Vietnam's population is now almost 90 million, making it the 13th largest nation in the world. Most of the population is ethnically Viet, with all other minorities accounting for about 13% of the population. The median age of the population at 27.5 years old. Since Vietnam is a communist country, religion doesn't play a very big role. More than 80% of Vietnamese say they don't have a religion, with 9% saying they are Buddhist and another 7% saying they are Catholic.